The front door opened without a knock. That should have been my first clue. "Dad?" Kyle's voice carried from the entryway. "We're here." I was in the kitchen making coffee. 7:30 on a Saturday morning. I hadn't invited anyone over. I walked out to find my son standing in the doorway with 2 suitcases and a woman I'd never met. She was young, mid-20s, blonde hair and a ponytail, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, already looking around my living room like she was measuring for new curtains. "Kyle, what's going on?" "Dad, this is Amber." He set the suitcases down. "My girlfriend. We're moving in for a while." Not asking, telling. "Moving in," I repeated, "just temporarily. Month or 2. Our lease fell through and we need a place until we find something new." Amber smiled at me. It didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks so much for having us, Mr. She trailed off. Kyle hadn't even told her my name. "Frank," I said. "Right, Frank." She walked past me into the living room, pulling out her phone. "Kyle, babe, where should we put our stuff? Upstairs bedroom?" My upstairs bedroom. The one that used to be Kyle's when he was growing up. The one I'd converted into a guest room after my wife Grace passed 3 years ago. Kyle was already heading up the stairs with the suitcases. Yeah, the big one at the end of the hall. I stood there in my own entryway, holding a mug of coffee, watching 2 strangers make themselves at home. If you've ever trusted someone just because they were family, take a second to like this video. It helps these stories reach people who need them. I'd raised Kyle by myself after Grace died. He'd been 26 then. Grief hit him hard. He'd moved back in for 6 months. The house felt too empty without her. He eventually got his own place across town. We'd see each other monthly. Normal adult son stuff. But something changed in the last year. The calls became less frequent. He started asking about the house, how much it was worth, if I'd thought about selling. I'd told him I wasn't interested. This house had 40 years of memories. I wasn't leaving unless they carried me out. He'd dropped it, or so I thought. Now here he was, with a girlfriend I'd never heard of, moving into my house without asking. I went back to the kitchen and poured another cup of coffee. Upstairs I could hear them moving furniture. And if stories like this matter to you, quiet ones, real ones, subscribing helps more than you think. By noon, Amber had rearranged my living room. The couch was against a different wall. My reading chair, the one Grace bought me for my 50th birthday, was facing the wrong direction. "Looks better this way," Amber said. "More open. Feng shui." I didn't say anything. They thought silence meant weakness. I'd learned silence was where decisions are made. Kyle was in the kitchen going through my refrigerator. "Dad, you don't have any real food. Just like lunch meat and leftovers." "I'm one person. I don't need much." "Well, we're here now. Amber's going to make a grocery list. We'll stock up." "With whose money?" Kyle looked up from the fridge. "I'll cover it. Don't worry." But he didn't look like someone who had money to cover anything. His jacket was worn. His jeans had a hole in the knee. And he'd mentioned his lease falling through, which usually meant he couldn't pay rent. Amber appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Babe, I'm going to take your dad's car to the store." "Keys?" "My car?" I said. "Just for an hour. I need to grab groceries and some things for the bedroom. That comforter upstairs is so old." She said it like she was doing me a favor. Kyle was already pulling keys off the hook by the door. "My keys." "Here. Be careful. The alignment pulls left." Amber took them without looking at me and walked out. I heard my car start in the driveway. Kyle sat down at the kitchen table. "Thanks for letting us stay, Dad. Really. We'll be out of your hair soon." "You didn't ask." "I know, but I knew you'd say yes. You always do." He said it like it was a fact, like I was predictable. Easy. I didn't say anything. He got up, grabbed a beer from my fridge, and went upstairs. I sat there in my kitchen listening to my own car drive away. Would you have spoken up or stayed quiet? Amber came back 2 hours later with 8 bags of groceries. She'd bought organic everything, almond milk, gluten-free bread, things I'd never eaten and didn't want. "This stuff's better for you," she said, loading it into my fridge. "You're what, 70? You should be watching your cholesterol." "I'm 68. "Right, even more reason." She threw out half the food I already had, said it was expired. It wasn't. I was about to say something when I heard the front door open. My neighbor Carol poked her head in. We had that kind of relationship. She'd check on me sometimes since Grace passed. Bring over extra cookies. Make sure I was eating. "Frank? Just wanted to—" She stopped when she saw Amber unloading groceries. "Oh, I didn't know you had company." Amber smiled. Not friendly. Territorial. "I'm Amber, Kyle's girlfriend. We're staying here for a while." "Staying?" Carol looked at me. "Temporarily," I said. Carol's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd been a social worker for 30 years before retiring. She knew when something was off. "Well, if you need anything, Frank, you know where I am." She left, but not before giving Amber one more look. Amber watched her go. "Nosy neighbor?" "Careful, neighbor," I said. She shrugged and went back to organizing my refrigerator like she owned it. By dinner, she'd taken over my kitchen completely, made some kind of quinoa bowl with vegetables I couldn't pronounce, put it in front of me like I should be grateful. Kyle ate without looking up from his phone. I took 2 bites and went to my bedroom. It was the only room in the house that still felt like mine. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the photo on my nightstand. Grace and me at the lake, summer of 2005. She was laughing at something I'd said. I couldn't remember what. I wondered what she'd think of this situation. Then I heard it. Voices, upstairs. Kyle and Amber, talking low but not quiet enough. I didn't know it yet, but by Monday morning, my house wouldn't legally be mine anymore. Think he noticed? No, he's clueless. Amber's voice, flat, professional. "They never do at first. How long do we need to stay? Couple weeks, maybe less if we move fast. I've done this before. It's all about timing. And the paperwork? I'm getting it notarized Monday. Bank opens at 9. We can have everything transferred by Tuesday afternoon if he doesn't catch on." My stomach dropped. Monday. 2 days. What if he fights it? Amber laughed. Low, cold. "Baby, men like him don't fight. They're too polite, too trusting. By the time they realize what happened, it's already done." I stood up, moved to the door, pressed my ear against it. Kyle's voice again. "You sure this'll work? Trust me, this isn't my first time. Old guys like him, they don't even see it coming. We'll have the house, the equity, everything. Just keep playing the concerned son." Laughter. Both of them. I stepped back from the door. No, my hands were shaking. Whatever this was, it wasn't about a lease falling through. I didn't sleep much that night. But then doubt crept in. What if I'd misheard? Kyle had always been careless with money, but this was different. This was criminal. I thought about Grace. "Give people the benefit of the doubt, Frank," she'd say. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just a paranoid old man. My hearing wasn't what it used to be. I sat up, looked at myself in the mirror. 68 years old, gray hair, slower than I used to be. What if they were right? What if this house was too much? No, I knew what I heard. Amber's voice. I've done this before. That wasn't about helping me. Kyle shows up unannounced with a woman I'd never met. No warning, no introduction. They move in without asking. She immediately starts taking over, rearranging furniture, throwing out my food, using my car like it's hers, talking about nursing homes, and the conversation I'd overheard. Paperwork, keep him distracted. Old guys like him don't see it coming. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't plan. A carefully constructed plan. And I'd been so caught off guard by Kyle just showing up that I hadn't seen it at first. But I saw it now. At 3 a.m., I got up and went to my office. Pulled out the file cabinet where I kept important documents. Deed to the house. Still in my name. Will. Everything left to Kyle. I'd written it 5 years ago, right after Grace died. Standard stuff. He was my only child. But there was something else in the file. Something I'd forgotten about. A power of attorney form. Blank, unsigned. Kyle had brought it to me 2 months ago. Said it was just in case something happened to me. That way he could handle things, pay bills, make decisions. I'd told him I'd think about it. I never signed it. But if he had that form, if Amber knew how to forge a signature, if they got it notarized Monday morning, my hand tightened around the unsigned document. Monday. That gave me less than 48 hours. I sat back in my chair. That's what they were doing. They weren't here to stay temporarily. They were here to take the house, forge my signature on a power of attorney, transfer the deed, push me into a nursing home or worse, and I'd have no way to prove I didn't sign it. No witnesses, no lawyer, just my word against a legal document. But first, I needed to be sure. I pulled out my phone and took photos of the deed, the will, the unsigned power of attorney form. Then I went back to bed, set my alarm for 6 a.m. I'd test them tomorrow, see if I was right, or if I was just a frightened old man jumping at shadows. That's when I realized something worse than betrayal. I was starting to doubt myself. Sunday morning, I woke up exhausted. My back hurt. My knees ached getting out of bed. Reminders that I wasn't as young as I used to be. I made it downstairs and started coffee. Tried to act normal. Amber came down first, smiled at me. "Morning, Frank. Sleep okay?" "Fine," I lied. She poured herself coffee, leaned against the counter. "Hey, random question. That power of attorney thing Kyle mentioned a while back. Did you ever sign it? My heart stopped. There it was. The confirmation I needed. She was asking, probing, testing to see if I'd done it. Still thinking about it, I said carefully. Her smile didn't waver. No rush. Just good to have that in order, especially at your age. At your age. Like I was already halfway to incompetent. I'll get to it, I said. She nodded and went back upstairs. I stood there, hands shaking again. I wasn't wrong. This was real. I pulled out my phone and sent the message I'd been composing in my head all night. Mitchell, my lawyer, the one who'd handled Grace's estate. I kept it simple. Need to see you Monday morning? Urgent. He replied within a minute. 8 a.m. My office. I put the phone down. 46 hours left. If I was right about this, I had 2 days to stop them before they made their move. Sunday morning, I acted normal. Amber was up early talking on the phone. I caught fragments. Yeah, he's easy. Tuesday at the latest. She joined Kyle at the table, smiled at me. Frank, you've lived here alone a while now. Must get lonely. I managed. Have you thought about moving somewhere with people your age? A community, activities, support, a nursing home? I like it here, I said. Of course, but just something to think about. You're not getting any younger. Kyle nodded along. She's right, Dad. This house is a lot to take care of. Stairs, yard work. What if you fell? Part of me wondered if they had a point. I'd slipped on the stairs last winter, but that's what they wanted. Doubt, fear. I'm fine. For now. Amber reached across the table and patted my hand. We just want what's best for you. Her nails were painted red, sharp. I pulled my hand back. I appreciate the concern. In my office, I made another call. Locksmith. I need all the locks. Changed. Today. Sunday. Gonna cost extra. How soon? 2 hours. Kyle and Amber were out when the locksmith came. He changed every lock. I paid cash. When I got home, Kyle was in the driveway. Angry. Dad, did you change the locks? Yes. Why? My house, my locks. Amber stepped out of the car. Her smile was gone. That's pretty paranoid, Frank. Maybe? Kyle's jaw tightened. You're making this weird. Am I? We're family. You don't trust your own son. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This was the kid I'd raised. Taught to ride a bike. Helped with homework, sat with in the hospital when he broke his arm in Little League, and now he was standing in my driveway, angry that I wouldn't make it easier for him to rob me. Come inside, I said. We need to talk. I had less time than I thought, and they were already moving faster. We sat in the living room, Amber on the couch, Kyle in the chair, me standing by the fireplace. I looked at them both. Really, looked at them. Two strangers who'd walked into my house and tried to take everything. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're both leaving. Tonight. Amber laughed. Not a real laugh. A dismissive sound. Excuse me? You heard me. Pack your things. Get out. Kyle stood up. His face was red. Dad, what the hell? I know what you're doing. What are we doing? The power of attorney. The nursing home talk. You're trying to take the house. Amber's smile was gone completely. She stood up, crossing her arms. That's insane. Is it? Because I heard you last night, talking upstairs. He's clueless. Old guys like him don't see it coming. Ring a bell? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Kyle's face went from red to white. Amber looked at him, then back at me. Kyle's face went pale. I pulled out my phone. I've sent copies of everything to my lawyer. He knows you're here. If anything happens to me, it all goes to the police. Oh. Looked at Amber. He also told me something interesting. You're not the first person to try this. There's a pattern. Young woman. Older man. Forged documents. He's seen it 4 times. Amber's face went pale. So no, Amber. This isn't your first time. But it's your last with me. She stood up. You can't prove anything. I don't have to. You're not on the deed. You're not on the will. You have no legal claim to this house. And if you try to forge my signature on anything, that's fraud. Felony fraud. 5 years minimum. She looked at Kyle. He looked at the floor. Now get out. Kyle finally looked up. Dad. I'm not your dad anymore. A son doesn't do this. You're a stranger who happens to share my DNA. You've got 1 hour. After that, I'm calling the police and having you removed for trespassing. Amber grabbed her purse. This is bullshit. Door's right there. She stormed past me, heading upstairs. Kyle stood there for a moment. He looked smaller than I remembered. Like a stranger wearing my son's face. I needed the money. Then get a job. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. He shook his head, followed Amber upstairs. I sat down and waited. It took them 43 minutes to pack everything. I sat in the living room the entire time. listening to drawers slamming, doors closing, footsteps heavy on the stairs. Amber came down first. She was crying, not sad crying, angry crying. The kind where your face gets red and your hands shake because you're not getting what you want. "You're going to regret this," she said. Her voice was shaking. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. "I doubt it. You'll die alone in this house. No one to take care of you. No one who gives a damn." I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd walked into my house 2 days ago and immediately started dismantling my life. "Better than dying in a nursing home you put me in so you could steal my house." She didn't have an answer for that, just stared at me with wet, angry eyes. Kyle came down with the suitcases. He wouldn't look at me. They walked to the door. Amber turned back one more time. "He's your son. You're really going to throw him out?" "He threw himself out the moment he decided to betray me." She left. Kyle paused at the door. "I'm sorry." "No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught." He didn't argue. The door closed behind them. I stood there for a moment. Then I walked to the door and turned the new deadbolt. The sound echoed through the quiet house. Click, loud, final. I heard my car start, the one they'd been using, but I'd already called and reported it stolen if they didn't return it within the hour. They knew that. 5 minutes later, a different car pulled up, someone picking them up. I watched from the window as they loaded their suitcases and drove away. The house was quiet again. Monday morning, I met with Mitchell. I showed him everything, the timeline, the conversation, the unsigned power of attorney, the Monday deadline. He leaned back. "If they'd forged that document, you'd have lost everything." "Can I do anything legally?" "Did they steal anything?" "Forge." "Anything?" "No. I stopped them." "Then there's no crime, just intent. But I'll document everything. If he tries to claim you're incompetent later, we'll have this on record." "Good. How are you doing?" he asked. His voice softened. Mitchell had known Grace, had been at her funeral. He knew what it meant for Kyle to do this. "Fine. Your son just tried to rob you, with a woman who's apparently done this before." "Ex-son." Mitchell nodded slowly. "I'll draft a new will. Cut him out completely. Leave everything to charity. Nursing scholarship maybe, in Grace's name. She'd like that." I signed the papers that afternoon. Mitchell kept 3 copies, one for his files, one for me, one for the county clerk. The day after they left, Carol came over. "Frank, can we talk?" We sat at the kitchen table. Carol looked serious. "That woman, Amber, something felt off." "It was," I said. I told her everything, the conversation, the forged plan, how close I'd come. Carol's face went pale. "Frank, that's elder fraud. I've seen this before." "I know." She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing. Some people, even family, you can't save them from themselves." 2 weeks later, Mitchell had the final papers ready. "You're sure?" he asked. "I'm sure. One more thing. I did some digging. Amber's real name is Amanda Westbrook. Record in Kansas, Nevada, same pattern. One case she cleaned out a 72-year-old widower before anyone caught on." My stomach turned. Kyle knew. Either he knew or he was too stupid to ask. I signed the papers. That was 6 months ago. I still live in the house. Same bedroom, same kitchen, same photos on the mantel. Grace smiling at me from the lake. The house feels like mine again. Kyle tried to call twice, blocked the number. He sent an email a month later, full of excuses. Desperate. "Amber convinced me." "Sorry." I printed it, put it in a folder labeled Evidence. A week later, he showed up. Stood on the porch, didn't knock. 5 minutes. I didn't open the door. Amber sent a message on Facebook. Something about how I misunderstood and they just wanted to help, that I was being cruel and breaking up a family. I blocked her. The house is in a trust now. When I die, it goes to a scholarship fund for nursing students. Grace Memorial Scholarship. Mitchell made sure Kyle can't contest it, can't touch a single dollar. I had the guest room repainted. Soft blue instead of beige. Got rid of the bed they slept in. Donated it to a church charity. Let someone else get some use out of it. Bought a new couch, too. The old one didn't feel right after Amber rearranged it. This one's comfortable. Faces the window like it should. Mitchell asked if I regretted it, cutting Kyle off completely. I thought about it. Then I thought about Grace. What she would have said if she'd seen her son try to steal from his own father. What she would have done if she'd heard Amber say, "Old guys like him don't see it coming." She'd have thrown him out herself. Probably would have changed the locks before I did. So no regrets. The house is mine. The life is mine. And no one's taking that from me. Not even my son. Sometimes I wonder if I've changed. If that weekend made me harder. Carol says no. Says I just learned to protect myself. Maybe she's right. I still have dinners with neighbors. Still say hello to strangers. Still hold doors open. But I don't let anyone move my furniture. Don't hand over my car keys. Don't sign anything without reading it twice. And I keep the new house key on my keychain now. The one Kyle never got a copy of. Sometimes I turn it over in my hand. Feel the weight of it, the sharp edges. It's just a key, but it's proof that some doors stay locked for a reason. And some people, even the ones you raised, don't get to come back through them. Most people my age don't talk about this, but we should. Some people say family should always come first. Others say self-respect comes first. I know where I stand now. I'm curious where you stand.